Geno talked about Caitlin Clark again and sort of gave some backhanded compliments. Like, he talked about how she connects to the audience, which was good. He talked about how she's tough, like Paige Bueckers. He threw Paige in there as well.
Geno Auriemma's hopes of turning Paige Bueckers into the next Caitlin Clark are slipping further out of reach. With Paige sidelined by another injury, it's starting to feel like Geno's dream of proving he made the right call is falling apart. It's almost tragic, like watching a bucket of cold water being poured on all his ambitions.
Geno Auriemma, Caitlin Clark again. The world turns. It's Caitlin Clark's world. We just live on planet Caitlin.
Caitlin Clark, on the other hand, keeps soaring higher and higher, making Geno's decision look worse with every jaw-dropping performance. If Geno's plan was to silence critics, this feels like the exact opposite. His misstep keeps getting louder and more obvious.
Last college women's basketball season, Samaria, Caitlin Clark had the sport by the throat. Iowa women's basketball was must-see TV, and if they were in a town, it was packed out in that arena, okay? The fan investment into Caitlin followed her to the WNBA, and viewership numbers for her games were sky high. Her mere presence alone helped several teams break attendance records, and in some instances, teams chose...
Caitlin Clark isn't just a great basketball player, she's a force of nature. Every game, every record she breaks, every award she wins is a reminder of what Geno passed up. And every time she makes headlines, it feels like another blow to Geno's reputation. Meanwhile, Paige, once seen as the next big thing, is struggling to keep up.
Paige Bueckers has been front and center in the women's basketball media landscape. There is so much hype around her, and a lot of people have a microscope on her and the UConn Huskies. A lot of people are expecting Paige to win her first national title this year with UConn before she does declare for the WNBA.
Needle mover. The biggest draw in American sports today, CC22, Caitlin Clark Kent. That's just
Geno didn't just pass on Caitlin Clark. He outright dismissed her. He called her fans delusional, doubting she could live up to their expectations.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart. There were actually odds on she's third or fourth in betting odds on being MVP.
Now, with every record Clark shatters, Geno's words seem to echo back at him.
I think she's handling great. I think she talks a lot of and she gets a lot of back. So she deserves everything she gets because she...
Paige, the player Geno put all his faith in, started out strong. Her freshman season was incredible. She dominated on the court, and everyone thought she was the future of the sport. But over time, cracks began to show. Her stats dipped, her aggression seemed to fade, and her ability to dominate big games started to waver.
However, times are much different than they were when Geno started coaching. One, I don't think it's the greatest look for him to continue to say some of these things in the media, especially with the kind of spotlight that is on Paige right now. And I do think that some of the spotlight that's on her and some of the pressure that a lot of media people have put on her is unwarranted. I don't think it's fair. She's a great player, but I think all of the comparisons and things that we've heard and people trying to make her Caitlin Clark when she's not.
Then came the injuries, keeping her off the court when her team needed her most. It's not that Paige isn't talented, she is, but as she sits out with yet another setback, it's hard not to wonder if Geno's system is part of the problem. Is she struggling because she's trapped in an outdated style of play that doesn't suit today's game? Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark is thriving in a way that feels almost inevitable. She's not just meeting expectations, she's crushing them. Her performances are electric, drawing comparisons to legends like Michael Jordan and Diana Taurasi. She's hitting impossible shots, running the floor with unmatched confidence, and pulling off plays that make fans gasp. Clark isn't just a player, she's an event. Her games pack arenas and pull in viewers who might never have cared about women's basketball before. This is where Geno's approach starts to look even shakier. While other programs have adapted to the modern game, building systems around dynamic players like Clark, Geno seems stuck in the past. His coaching style, once innovative, now feels rigid. Paige isn't just competing against Clark, she's fighting to thrive in a system that might not even suit her. It's like trying to run today's apps on a flip phone. It's just not built for the times. Clark's rise isn't just about her own success, it's about what she represents. She's the future of women's basketball. Her games are setting attendance records, drawing massive TV audiences, and creating buzz that extends far beyond the court. She's redefining what's possible in the sport and inspiring a new generation generation of players and fans. And while she's doing all of this, Geno's decision to pass on her keeps looking worse. What did he miss? Why couldn't he see the potential that was so obvious to others? The question of what might have been is impossible to ignore. Geno had the chance to coach Caitlin Clark, to be part of her story, but he chose a different path. Now, as Clark continues to dominate, it's hard not to see Geno's choice as a failure to adapt to the changing game. Women's basketball is evolving, and Caitlin Clark embodies everything it's becoming: faster, smarter, and more dynamic. Geno's decision feels like a refusal to embrace that evolution, and it's costing him. For Paige, this isn't just about her injuries or her struggles on the court. It's about the system she's been placed in, and the pressure of living up to expectations that were always going to be impossible. The comparisons to Clark aren't fair, but they're unavoidable. Caitlin Clark's story isn't just about basketball. It's about taking risks and trusting potential. Geno had a chance to take that risk and he didn't. Now he's left watching as Clark becomes the player everyone wants to see, while Paige's journey becomes a cautionary tale about what happens when you stick to what feels safe. Greatness doesn't come from playing it safe. It comes from seeing what others don't and believing in it. Caitlin Clark is proof of that, and Geno's missed opportunity, that's a lesson he'll have to live with.